Hey, welcome to Amp Up Solar Talk. Today we're excited to have David Parker from Solis, a leading name in high voltage hybrid inverter technology. Today we'll be talking about how these inverters integrate with the LG high voltage batteries to form powerful, reliable, and scalable ESS solutions for homeowners. If you'd like to join in the conversation, drop your questions in the chat. David, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate it. Thank you to you and the Signature Solar team for having us.
Absolutely. So for those who may not know the company well, how would you describe Solis and what sets you apart in the inverter space?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. Solis is a long-time global string inverter company. We started 20 years ago. We are a Chinese company. We are based in China. We're a very large company. We're global. We have almost 5,000 employees globally. And all we do is inverters, and all we do is string inverters. So we are a pure play string inverter company. And I think the fact that we're global really affords a lot of strength to the American consumers, the American public, right? In Canada, North America, Puerto Rico. Um, we are operating in over 100 countries, and we have many AHJs. There's 50 hertz grids over here, 60 hertz grids over there. We have various certification bodies, IECs in Europe, ULs in America. So these inverters are very well vetted from that perspective, and it's all we do. So we are very focused on making very reliable inverters for the world today, and we specialize in just bringing the PV power in and putting it into the batteries or charging the loads and just making string inverters. So I think that Solis Genlong Technologies heritage is really our strength.
Yeah, so when you can focus on one component, you can make it the best that it can possibly be, is what I assume.
Yeah, we've had 20 years to hone our metal and perfect the art, as they say. And again, we operate in such a wide variety of applications. We're in mountain climates, we're in dry climates, we're in jungle climates, we're in islands. We're literally all over the world. And so I think this affords some strength in the design and so forth with our experience.
Right, for sure. So today we're looking specifically at the Solis 11.4 kilowatt hybrid inverter. Can you give me a high level overview of this inverter, its features, and its capabilities?
Yeah, sure can. Thank you. So that's the 11.4 kilowatt S6 hybrid inverter. It does come in a number of sizes. So there is a 3.8, there's a 5, there's a 6, there's a 7.6, there's a 10, and there's 11.4. If we just talk about the 11.4, it's a fantastic hybrid inverter. It does have an automatic transfer switch built in, has a 4 millisecond transfer time. If the grid drops, it's going to take you offline really quickly, and you can easily bring in up to say 1.7 on a DC AC ratio. So call it 17 kilowatts of PV you could bring into this 11.4 kilowatt inverter, and you can hook up a battery. I'm not sure that the battery has a kilowatt hour limitation on the other side of it, but you can parallel batteries. So it can really scale, and it's got 47.5 amps of continuous AC on or off grid and 76 amps of surge for 10 seconds. That's our 11.4 kilowatt model, but it's got plenty of MOTSI for off-grid purposes.
Okay, so how many of these can you parallel together in one system?
To 6. So if you really wanted to go into a larger application, it would be either a small commercial application or a really good size home. 6 of them, it's additive in the current. So the amount of continuous AC on or off grid would literally be 47.5 times 6. Number escapes me at the moment in terms of math in my head. And it would be 76 amps of surge power times 6 for 10 seconds. So you could get into hundreds of amps of continuous AC and quite a bit more than that in terms of the surge power.
Right, so this could typically be a whole home backup solution, right, with people having 200 amp pass through for a whole home. Is that correct?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Kelly. That's another good question. I think if you really wanted to get real about what I would call whole home, you would need two of these inverters. I don't think you could call one of them whole home if you had a 200 amp service. You would only have 47.5 amps of continuous AC, 76 amps of surge, not quite meeting the definition in my mind of whole home. But I do have two of these at my home, and I use batteries with them, and it's perfectly capable of running my home. So yes, you can achieve a very effective whole home solution with two of our Solis S6 inverters.
Okay, perfect. So when Solis started developing this particular hybrid inverter, and the reason that we are talking about this particular one is because we are moving to talk about our bundle with the LG batteries. But what kind of homeowner needs or real world challenges were you looking to solve?
Well, yeah, the usual suspects when it comes to solar. We wanted to give people energy independence. We wanted to give them an equipment set that could allow them to put PV on their home and power their home from the PV. When you get into the addition of batteries, it brings you into other areas in terms of the overall value. If the utility has a time of use rate schedule, then having batteries can help you monetize the batteries and save money slash make money with the energy storage by deploying that when the sun goes down and you're still in that high peak rate. So use the stored electrons to keep you from buying those expensive electrons from the grid. And then, of course, backup. If you have batteries and you have a hybrid inverter and the grid goes away, you've got the battery that's in the energy that's stored in the batteries. And depending on the weather and what the next day looks like, you can run your system, in perpetuity, charging it with PV, run the batteries at night, charge it with PV. In my home, even if I ran the batteries out at 4 o'clock in the morning, I have dark start capabilities on all the system. And so the next day I can bring the system back up with PV power the loads, charge the batteries again, and repeat that, in perpetuity with the grid down. So it does bring a lot of feature sets to the consumer.
So has this one always been designed then to work with battery backup?
Yes, the hybrids, absolutely. It's not required. That's a good question. It's not required. You don't have to have batteries in order for the inverter to work. The inverter is very flexible. It can be used with no PV and batteries only, in which case you're kind of energy arbitrage. You would charge your battery in the 3 o'clock in the morning, its power is cheap, and then discharge it during the daytime. That works. The inverter doesn't have to have the PV. And the same thing on the battery. You can have the PV, you can connect it to the home, you can use the PV to load the home and add the battery a year later, 2 years later, at any point that you want to. So very, very versatile. And direct answer to your question is that it was designed in its feature set to be used with batteries, but it's not a requirement. We wanted to really give the homeowners the most amount of flexibility that we could.
Right, that sounds great. So for batteries, then, what makes LG stand out as the perfect partner for pairing with the Solis inverter?
Yeah, thank you for that. LG is a great name. LG is a very large company. LG has a long and storied past. They've got a lot of. They're a great brand. They've been in America for a long time. They have an energy division. The energy division's been in America for a long time. So they are also a very competent company. They've got great engineers. They make good products. And so when we were approached, it seemed to be a perfect trilogy with Solis and LG and Signature Solar. So we think LG is a great company. We like their batteries. We're happy to be here. We're proud to be bundled with them, and we're fortunate that we're both involved with Signature Solar.
Okay, well, we're proud to have you guys with us as well. We do have an audience question, and we knew this one was coming. This one's from Simon. He says, what about the story that the Chinese have cutoff switches in their inverters for solar? This is quite alarming.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Here's my thoughts on it. I read the article. It was kind of vague. It referenced communication equipment and it referenced utility scale. Didn't mention any names. Fair enough. So let me say this. All hybrid inverters have some way of communicating. right? They communicate for a couple of reasons. The most transparent reason is to monitor the system. I have a system. If I wanted to pull my phone up right now and start hitting buttons on my phone, I could show you my system. Well, the reason I can show you my system is because it's communicating. So there is communication associated with inverters. Um, and it's typically about either monitoring or it's about potentially having a firmware upload from the OEM from time to time in a maintenance kind of a mode. We might want to upload firmware. The way that inverters communicate in the residential context is usually via a data logger or a dongle. So if you did not want your inverter to communicate, you remove the dongle. I mean, walk over to an inverter and unplug it. The dongle is like the PV or the batteries. It has a purpose. It has a very specific thing that it does, but it is not required by the inverter to function. So you want monitoring? Plug the dongle in, commission the monitoring, boom, it'll show you what the system's doing all the time. You don't want monitoring, pull the dongle out. There's no monitoring, and the inverter will not communicate. The only way to do anything to it would be to stand there next to it and literally interact with it that way. When you move into from the residential space into the C&I space, three-phase commercial rooftop solar carports, that kind of thing in the commercial space, and then you move even further, what we call FTM, and you go front of the meter and you're dropping solar farms, utility scale solar. The use of the data loggers in the residential context becomes less prevalent. What becomes more prevalent are third-party monitoring solutions. Also, Energy is a great example. Also, Energy is a good company. They do third-party monitoring. So a couple things. Number one, if you have a system like that, it is easy enough from an IT perspective to encapsulate that in some kind of a closed system to where the data is not going anywhere. You don't want the data to go. That's not a problem. I'm not an expert in that area, but I know people in the development world do it all the time. We know people that get close to GSA installations. Diego Garcia, we're doing military stuff, same kind of a thing. So you're in control as to how you set the system up. If you want it to communicate, it can. If you don't want it to communicate, it won't. I mean, so I'm not sure what the article was specifically referring about. But I would say, again, from a Solis perspective, we put our customers in the driver's seat. We put you in the driver's seat. The inverter's got a number of settings for you to use it. It's got a bunch of equipment that you can connect to it. You don't have to connect any specific piece of equipment, but if you do, it all comes together as a nice, bundled feature set. And again, same thing with the IT monitoring communications. If you want it, great. It's there for you. We've got a nice solution for it. And if you don't, you're in control to make that not be the case.
I like what you said. I never thought about that. That if you just unplug the dongle, once it's set up, you don't need it any longer. Your batteries are still going to communicate with your inverter. Your system's still going to run. If you ever need to see what your system is doing or you need to change some settings, you just go plug it back in, do what you need to do, and then unplug it again.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be in control of your inverter that you bought for me at your house. I want you to be in control of your inverter that you bought for me at your house. So we really do try to put the end user in the driver's seat.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. So we've talked a lot about the advantages in a couple of different episodes, of high voltage versus 48 volt systems. And so what we know is Solis is a high voltage inverter, and it has to be paired with the LG, which are, with high voltage batteries, which the LG batteries are. And we know that we can't pair the LG batteries with a 48 volt inverter, and we can't pair the Solis inverter with 48 volt batteries. So talk to me a little bit about the advantages of a high voltage system versus a 48 volt system.
Yeah, thank you. So high voltage, more current equals smaller wire size. Basically that's one advantage. As you get into the higher current applications, the range on the Solis S6 for the battery connection, I believe, is 120 to 500. So 120 volts to 500 volts. That's the range. And so the first thing I would say is smaller wire sizes. I believe you can use AWG8, in certain applications to connect the inverter. The other thing I would say is that it's slightly more efficient. Higher voltage requires a little less inversion. And so there are some very small incremental improvements that you would get in the efficiency. And that's really kind of about it. 48 volt or high voltage in the residential context, I think is almost kind of a preference. They're both out there, both perfectly viable solutions. I think the meaningfulness of high voltage kind of becomes a little more pronounced in the commercial applications when you start talking about the wire sizes, when you have hundreds of panels and you're lots and lots of runs and you're using spools of wire, that it can be a little bit more meaningful. But I would say that, just higher current, smaller wire gauge, and better efficiency.
Okay. Is this a system where you can start small and then expand over time? Or how flexible is this system?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's another good question. It's very flexible. So there's really nothing that you couldn't change, right? So the inverter is kind of like the electron traffic cop of the whole thing. It's the brains of the system. The PV over here on the rooftop over here, you could change the PV. You could add PV. So you can bring more PV in. The batteries. Let's say you had a Solis S6 and you had an LG battery, but you had one of the batteries, and you want to add another battery. Well, then you can parallel that LG to the first LG and connect them to the Solis S6. Let's say that you did an add-on to the home and added some square footage, perhaps increased your air conditioning, tonnage, and maybe got an EV or some combination thereof. Something changed about your electrical, kind of profile at your home. Let's say you want to add another inverter. So if you have one 11.4, you can add another 11.4. If you had one 11.4 with 10 kilowatts of solar, add 7 more kilowatts of solar. If you had one S6 with one battery, add another battery, or any combination thereof. So there are a wide varieties of ways that you can change the system over time to meet the consumer's needs.
Okay, so what I hear you saying then is with each inverter that you have in your system, you can potentially pair two batteries with each inverter in your system. Is that correct?
That's correct. So that is correct. If you
Wow,
had two Solis S6s for a whole home battery system, you could have 4 LG batteries, two connected to each Solis S6, which would
that's
be
a lot of potential
64
power.
kilowatt hours. That'd be rocking.
Yeah. Okay. So who do you think is really going to get the most out of a setup like this?
I think the everyday homeowner. I mean, the predominant value in my mind is just the simple use case of using the electrons from the PV system to power the load. Right. I love running my home from the sun. It's awesome. It's great. Feels good. I love it. So that's the primary use. You're having extra electrons and putting them into the batteries. This gets you into time of use, kW demand charges, different kinds of use cases for the batteries outside of the context of backup. And so it's one of those things that you can add to the system if you need to, and you can use it in various use cases. It really does bring the maximum amount of value to the consumers, I believe.
How long have you had this system at your home?
Since June of last year. Well, the solar system I've had for 10 years, since 2015. And I'm sorry, SMA. I took down my SMA 5000 TL Sunny Boys and put two Solis S6s up with some batteries in June of 2024. Been loving it ever since.
Okay. So have you heard from any other maybe installers or homeowners stories about having this system in their home that stands out to you that really highlights some of the value of this system?
Yeah, we do. We've got customers in California that are using the system. It's if you are in, I don't have time of use rate structure, so my batteries aren't really economically making me that kind of money as far as time of use. I'm happy I don't have time of use, but I'm not in that mode. We do have customers that are in California that do have time of use rate structures. Some of these time of use rate structures get over 50 cents a kilowatt hour when they hit that peak rate. And we've heard from customers repeatedly that, if the system is sized right, everything's working great, it's beautiful. That will power the load during the day. By the time they get to 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock, depending on daylight savings time or whatever, sun's starting to go down, they've got the batteries topped up. Batteries are 100%, going into the evening. Sun goes down over the Santa Monica Pier, and next thing you know, the batteries take off and keep them out of that peak rate. And it really it's an economic play. I mean, it saves you money every day. Every kilowatt hour that you make from the sun and either use directly or store in your battery and use later is one that you didn't have to buy from the grid, one that wasn't created from a local coal plant, some natural gas plant, maybe a nuclear plant, who knows, didn't have to go down hundreds of miles of transmission lines, lose a bunch of the electricity along the way. I mean, it's just such a big decentralized or big centralized system that's got these big plants to get it out there, that the intelligence of putting the power plant on your roof and using the power right there from the sun on your roof with the wire that goes from your roof to the panel, why not? I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I think if more people adopted solar and more people adopted solar with batteries, it helps the grid. It helps every state, it helps the interconnects, it helps stability, it helps the voltage control, frequency regulation. I mean, there's all kinds of different values that the grid experiences by this same thing, which kind of maybe segues us into VPPs because that's another benefit of it is virtual power plants. The utility companies have gotten a hold of this concept. I've had conversations with CFOs of utility companies, and I said, look, kind of goes like this. Take a city of San Antonio. You got, 2-3 million people down there. CPS Energy's got 1 million meters. Let's say that 100,000 people have solar systems and 10,000 people of those have batteries, and they each have the magical, 20 kilowatt hours. Funny math in the head here, they got like a gigawatt, 2 gigawatts of battery storage in the sky, right? They aggregate all of these, and it becomes, the reason it's a VPP, it stands for virtual power plant, is that's what it becomes. It becomes a virtual power plant. These systems are all connected via a software program, and the utility monitors the system and aggregate and looks at the state of charge and is looking at their grid operations and so forth. And here's the scenario. It's a super sunny day in Texas. It's, 6 p.m. on August 27th. It's 107 outside, and the Texas grid is in trouble. And the guys at CPS look at their VPP, these 10,000 folks across San Antonio, and they say, hey, how much power? What's the state of charge in aggregate? Oh, well, we're 90%. Man, we got like almost a gigawatt there. And they go, great, hit the red button. So they hit the button, the proverbial button. They send a signal to these systems individually. They send a signal to each one that says discharge now. And that's what our inverters have, the communication protocols that enabled the utilities to interact with these systems. And so they would take those electrons, all of those electrons would flood onto the grid. The grid would receive the benefit of that, keep the grid out of trouble, right? And then everybody's going to get compensated on their next bill for that event. That's a VPP.
Right, for providing that power back. Appreciate you explaining that. We do have some questions. This one is from My Solar Addiction with host David Newman. He says, what are the top reasons for someone with a 48-volt whole home system currently switching to a high voltage Solis LG system?
I wouldn't do that if your system's working. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I would never recommend to gut out a 48-volt system for a high voltage system. I think if you are looking at installing a system for the first time, you would have a consideration between 48 volt and high voltage. I would say, number one, look at the gear that's available and the company behind the gear, see if that's something that's you're comfortable with. And then, the fact that you can use a little bit smaller wire sizes with the current and the fact that you get a little bit better efficiencies, I don't know. To some people, that may be enough to swing the decision for the high voltage side. Everybody makes that call on their own. But I would never take a perfectly good system. There's not enough to do that. If your 48 volt system is working and it's functional, great. Now, if your inverter went out, then you'd have to replace the inverter and the battery, to your point, because you have a 48 volt battery and a 48 volt inverter. I wouldn't do that. I think I like high voltage if it's the fork in the road the first time, simply for smaller wire sizes and better efficiency. But that's it. That's where I hang my hat. And that's not powerful enough to go undo one or anything like that. So if your system's working, ride it till the cows come home.
Gotcha. We're out of time, but we do have one more question. Then we need to close out. EVs and LSX says, when will the 11.4 be available and what is the cost?
Okay. The 11.4 should be available, I'm going to say, in June. We are working on the final preparations right now with LG and with Signature Solar. So I'm going to say June. I'm going to put Kelly on the spot here and say June. And then pricing, I'm going to say call your local Signature Solar representative and they will get you pricing. That's my politically correct answer.
Thanks so much, David, for joining us today. This was a great conversation, and I think a lot of folks are really going to walk away with some real insights into what makes Solus and the LG pairing such a solid option. So I appreciate that. And if you would like to learn more about the Solus LG bundle, keep an eye out on our website because it's coming soon. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, give us a follow and subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode of Amp Up Solar Talk. And we'll see you next time right here on Amp Up.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you.
Thanks, David.